Alright, welcome back to Game 10 of Lucid's 2022 tournament, where we are playing Phlegra. It is turn 68, and we have a major Atlantean army moving into our territory. Yeah, receiving a lot of attacks. Bringing in a few extra skeletons can't hurt to bulk out the forces a little bit. Finish research in Thaumaturgy 7, mostly for charm, not going to be super useful for us. Headed to Evocation 9 next. Flames from the Sky, maybe eventually. We do have mages that can cast it. You know, we do have okay fire income, and then on to the raids. Is this feeble-minded? No, okay, this is actually some water elemental raiding. And we have our tyrant hanging out here, so this should work out for us. Let's see, yeah, living water. Water elementals are definitely dangerous, and like Soul Vortex is not going to help us there. Yeah, we're in advance and cast spells, which is a little dicey. I don't know. I'm still undecided if I, prefer advance and cast spells versus melee. I do think like if we run into a fairly like major concentration of units, like they're actually like pretty good spellcasters and can be a lot more damaging that way rather than just like hitting a guy, once a turn. Or I guess maybe twice a turn if you give them 2 weapons, but of course, we've seen how like they can be killed if they're up against a lot of units. So I'm assuming this is probably also water element. No, just more feeble-minded fellows. And then looks like some skelly spam. We've seen how we can have problems with skelly spam, but we have no one here to receive it. And this is probably in our territory. Not sure exactly where this is, because this is more than one province defense. Right, this is the province that has a lot of gem income, so right next door to Raga. We don't really lose too much. Atlantis doesn't really lose too much. We couldn't really resist that because they had a major army there, so it's like anything we move out to resist could be destroyed by the army. That said, it seems like Atlantis, for the most part, prefers to raid ahead of its armies, so maybe should start gambling more that we're gonna face like some sort of moderate raider or moderate raiding group. And it does look like this is probably a combination of those 2 raiding groups, which is unfortunate because I do think we're going to lose this pretty handily since short bows are pretty worthless, and I've decided to target, for whatever reason, the ice-clad with shields instead of the more lightly armored fellows who don't have shields, but the mysteries of the Dominion's AI. Not spellcasting in this case. Yeah, our Mouflon get slaughtered pretty handily. They're not going to like the cold. They're not going to like the poison barbs. They're not going to like the frozen heart. It's a lot of things these Mouflon riders or cataphracts do not like. There's some ice elementals back there. We do have one mage who is dying of disease. Again, like these raiding groups were kind of throwaway. We were hoping they would survive, a few more turns, but they do not. And they don't really sell their lives, at great cost for Atlantis. The Mouflon do kind of hurt because, they are a decent amount of gold. Perhaps should not have committed them as raiders, but I think, the Helit archers, they really can't raid against much. We were really primarily using them only as siege strength, and patrollers. We could still use patrollers, definitely, but siege strength is probably not something that we need to worry about. So it does look like this is the major Atlantean army, and it did choose to not jump on top of our throne fortification, right? They chose to sidestep it. So, we'll probably just shadow them. There's no way that we want to fight this army in cold. It'll be interesting to see if Atlantis will probably try to pave the way, I would guess, with the spell. I think not Murdering Winter. I think it's Wolven Winter is the one that turns the temperature down. So yeah, obviously we lose this. Like I said, we'll continue to shadow that and look for a place where we can have a favorable engagement. And then here we are, just raiding deep in somewhat deep in Atlantis' territory. Hopefully not yet disconnected. And we'll hopefully be able to destroy some answers at points as Atlantis, tries to move out and raid things. And so Atlantis, this lake, which we took from them a long time ago. Yeah, we didn't really invest in the province defense here. In some ways, Atlantis is kind of doing us a favor because I think this mage probably should have given him some water gems. Like we just had an event that gave us this mage and a bunch of these units, and we have no way to get rid of them, and they're not really that useful for us. They're also not that great, so I don't expect them to do very well. Like, that's fine. We're not going to be able to hold the underwater against Atlantis. The only way that works out for us, underwater is if we're doing well on land, right? And Atlantis can't really, fight us anymore. But we are going underwater here. As I say this, there's not a whole lot here. We don't catch that raiding group, of course, because it moved to destroy our own raiding groups. We do unfortunately bleed out some long dead horsemen, but they don't have a lot of hit points, so they do tend to attrit out relatively quickly. And then let's see, this is potentially, nope, not our fortification. So this is that, kind of medium-sized army near one of our fortifications. Like I said, yeah, these guys aren't even set up in a communion. So, there are a lot of two-handers here, definitely. So, some danger. The sea serpent is kind of interesting. I guess he's here for the fear, I imagine, which probably won't be a problem for our tyrants. I'm pretty sure they're berserkers, so not too worried about them routing. So I was thinking that force was going to jump on top of our fort, but chose not to. We can try to chase that down. Like I said, that's definitely prime candidate for our tyrants to destroy. So a lot less worried about that army. We are losing a good amount of ground here. Yeah, we left our crossbowman here. This is that one guy who took the feeble-minded fellow who took a province from us last turn. But we were ready for him this turn. So at least we didn't lose 2 provinces to a feeble-minded, forgiving father. And then this looks like one of our fortifications. Not sure. Yeah, okay, so here you go. Here's the Wind of Death trap. Looks like he managed to hit himself, though it probably won't matter. Well, maybe it could matter. Atlanteans are fairly long-lived, although I guess this is the late age, so they're probably, not quite as long-lived. Yeah, it looks like it's not actually going to matter all that much for him. So, we talked about how Atlantis is probably going to be trying to wipe out our army with, Wind of Death casts. And, well, here they are. So we're going to have to continue to keep, dodging around and, maybe make some suboptimal movements in the sense that, moving to a place that doesn't really make sense because we think that Atlantis is going to move their army to the place that doesn't make sense because they're going to move their Wind of Death caster to the place that makes sense. And this is where we get into the mind games portion of Dominions. So we'll see how that goes. We have some unexpected events. Yeah, and this is not actually that unexpected. So we have a Woven Winter. This is probably, I'm not sure where this is. This might be where they moved to. Okay, this is where the Wind of Death trap occurred, right? So this is a fortification province of ours, and probably the location that they're going to be attacking. So, maybe there is no mind games to be played now going forward. Or, maybe this is just them committing 5 water gems to make the mind games more convincing. Time will tell. We can counter this, right? So we can at least keep the temperature at more or less neutral. But we won't be able to fight in heat, which is, not unexpected. We really actually only have 1 mage that can cast that, so we can only cover 1 province a turn. So even if we wanted to guess all the various locations that Atlantis is going to be doing that, we just don't have the mages to do so. So I kind of figured that Atlantis would do it in a province, and then now the following turn we can cast it there, at least ensuring that it's going to stay at roughly neutral temperature. So not great news, but not the end of the world. A bunch of dead rats in a harbor. I don't even know why we're being bothered by this. With some misfortune, but we have misfortune 3. Disease is spreading, and it's fine. Toads falling from the sky. Somebody got disease. That could be a bit unfortunate. And then we have a worldwide event. A deathmatch competition. Yeah, I don't know. We probably won't be committing to this. I can't remember if we have an arena mod on or not. Definitely our tyrants are good arena contenders, but at the same time, we kind of need them right now. So I'm not keen to risk one in the arena. We find a sneaking enemy, getting rid of scouts, always nice. The barbarians breached our palisade, a few other minor things, and I'll catch you guys after the jump. All right, this is the situation and what we're doing about it. A couple of pivotal turns coming up here, no doubt. We are mostly on the defensive, as we've discussed, now that we're no longer sieging Raga. We've got 2 armies coming in, so Atlantis has committed everything to us. Which makes sense since we're currently in a 1v1. So let's talk about what we're going to call their southern army from here on out. It sidestepped the throne, so definitely glad that I didn't concentrate here, although in some ways possibly would have been better. I went and checked the mages in this army, and there are actually no air death mages left in this army, and happily, this guy actually died, I'm assuming due to the due to the decay at the end of the battle. So that's pretty nice. Like, it's only 25% of those slow to recruit capital only mages get the air path, and thereby the air death path. Unfortunately, the fellow in here is an air death mage, so I think there's a decent chance that this force actually combines on top of this fort, which means we have to worry about more Wind of Death traps, walking our army into Wind of Death traps. On the other hand, this is the province that got hit with the cold spell. It is a throne province, kind of expecting it to get attacked. So Atlantis definitely could move here. As a result, we're going to do nothing. If we commit to the throne fortification, then we'll probably lose this fortification, or potentially, they'll move over to Phlegra and just try to take that from us. So I'm not really quite willing to, abandon our option to cover the interior of our territory. At the same time, if we try to intercept these armies combining in this location and they don't combine and this army instead jumps on top of the throne, same story. We'd give up the throne fortification, which I said, isn't such a big deal fairly recently, right? Because we wouldn't lose a temple or anything like that. But in thinking through it, right, I mean, we can't really sit on any fortifications, right? Otherwise, we're just going to get Wind of Death repeatedly. In fairness, it is somewhat difficult for Atlantis to magic phase move those guys around, but I'm not thrilled about the idea, of having to sit on top of a fort, at least not with our current force makeup. So we're going to see where Atlantis goes. I'm assuming they have some gem reloads with them, because while they do have an air death caster here, he doesn't actually have any death gems on him. It'd be great if this guy just continued to raid. We are actually moving one of our tyrants out. This fellow who, might intercept this group. I do think it's fairly likely that, there's a combination here, so we probably won't catch it, but you never know. We're also going to move our tyrant in to recapture this territory, try to close down this raiding group. If it chooses to hang out for whatever reason, we'll destroy it. But for the moment, right, trying to not delay the major battle, but make sure that, we're going to have it without losing one of our forts for free. So we want to see where Atlantis goes, and then we'll react with our army, potentially combining some more of these tyrants, into that battle. Also of note, I think we are, patrolling with some of our cap-only mages, which I don't love. There is an outside possibility that Atlantis just slams into this. I don't think that's likely, right, considering they sidestepped the throne, and now, this is an even larger force. Now, granted, it may not be that they're worried about our army. They just wanted to Wind of Death it. So there's an outside possibility they just slam into this fortification, in which case we lose those mages. It's not the end of the world. We'll just break siege immediately. These guys are patrolling because there's at least one vampire out there running around, and we do not want this army to get locked in by a thug. It wouldn't be great for the army to get locked in, and actually now talking through this, we maybe should have just patrolled. It's a lot of research to lose. Research, I mean, it's still going to be useful, but we've talked about how we don't really have a ton of other targets that we desperately need to hit. And I do think this would be an advantageous place for us to take a battle, which is another reason that I don't think Atlantis will do it. So anyway, that's what's going on in the south. Otherwise, shifting some mages around. We're doing something about the barbarians. Yeah, living fire. So some fire elementals, spending fire gems. It's not great. Don't really have any troops in the region. Our tyrants are busy doing other things. It is what it is. We are pretty desperate for gold. So unlocking this and getting more income out of it would be nice. We're going to move on top of this fortification. It does actually look, I think, that Atlantis actually split their raiding groups. So that was just one raiding group that our raiding groups got destroyed by. So this force will probably have to fight the combination of all this. And I don't know. I don't know whether we can beat that. We'll see. We'll probably hang out and risk it. I don't know. I say that now. We'll see what it looks like once it gets closer. And then, of course, the other major thing is that their northern army moved out here. We're not 100% sure that this is everything, because unfortunately we didn't have a scout on top of Raga. Atlantis has been doing a good job of patrolling, so sitting on top of their forts is a bit difficult. Certainly, there's a lot of numbers here. Could be more. Scout report could be low. There seem to be very few mages, right? There's only one of their cap-onlys that's shown in the scout report. I do wonder if, the Griffins are kind of hiding some of the mages, because the Griffins are pretty large, right? So it's they're going to take up a good chunk. So, yeah, kind of surprised to only see one of these. This seems very suspicious. We don't see any mention of any other mages which just seems wrong, right? Like, we know Atlantis has mages in this area. It's possible that he left them all in Raga, but seems very unlikely to commit all of this, a good chunk of which are his cap-only sacreds, without any mage support. So anyway, this all seems very suspicious. And I went back and looked through some of the older turns, and definitely there's plenty of air death mages that were in this region. So I'm kind of expecting a Wind of Death trap. Basically I'm seeing Wind of Death traps, around every corner, behind every door right now, which I don't think is necessarily wrong. Like, we'll see. Obviously, these aren't free for Atlantis to be pulling off. Like, the last one they attempted, they lost the mage that did it. I do think with a little more kitting, like, I'm pretty sure that guy was completely unkitted, which, is perhaps a tad irresponsible for such a valuable mage. Okay, no, he has kit. He has offensive kit, but you could certainly add, like, an amulet of anti-magic and potentially some armor as well, to make it more likely. Like, his magic resistance is not that great. So anyway, like, they could be improved. But there's always the chance that they knock themselves out with their own Wind of Death. They are a fairly rare and valuable mage for Atlantis, so while they've had plenty of time during the game to build up quite a few of those mages, they don't have an unlimited supply, and they don't want to waste all of them on us. On the other hand, like, we are an excellent target for it, so, we'll see how many more of these we end up having to survive, but we're going to try something a little weird. We definitely have the option, right, to move. This is a great place to stop this attack from Atlantis. Once they take this province, there's a lot of places they could go. Our life gets harder. But on the other hand, because it's such an obvious place to defend, right, there's a great way, you move your army in, it's like, hey, I'm going to move forward, and then guess what? Wind of Death trap. So we're going to try to split the difference and risk some of our really expensive tyrants, their gear. We've seen how, like, the tyrants haven't really been able to take on armies, and I'm not hopeful in terms of, how well these guys do. We have switched things up a little bit. This guy's got Legions of Steel in there, so that will help, hopefully, both of their protection a bit more than they were before. We've also got a Vine Shield mixed in here, which should help significantly. And the other big thing is we're going to cast Firestorm. Now, it's late enough in the game. I'm pretty sure Atlantis is going to have Army of Gold, which pretty much neutralizes Firestorm. But, we will be casting it turn 1, so we might get some damage in. And, even when we didn't do fantastic, our super combatants were able to hang out for a little while. So if we drag the battle out long enough, like, we may get some mage casualties from Atlantis. And then we've actually given this guy Crystal Matricy, right? So he doesn't have a Ring of Regeneration, though this is our hero who's got, unequaled obesity. So he has a lot more hit points. Like, he hopefully will be able to put up Soul Vortex. He should be able to, because we've brought out, a Sacrificial Communion. So it's going to boost him by 2 paths of magic, assuming this guy can stay alive. He just needs to make it through 1 spell, really. Which, could be a tall order in his state. But anyway, right, so we have this guy back here. He's just on spells, so he's going to hopefully hang out in the back, and live as long as possible for the Firestorm to do as much as it can, while this guy's going to be on advance and spells, so hopefully a good chunk of the army will get, stuck on this guy for a while. Before they even make it over to this guy, and then just anti-magic to, offset the load of spells that these guys have to cast. We're also bringing along 2 Unhappy Yetis, and they will hopefully be targeted by the Soul Slays, although this guy doesn't actually have that many hit points, so while he's a good candidate for sacrifice, like, maybe, might not be enough hit points to, get hit with Soul Slay, we'll see. 2 Yetis for eating up Soul Slays, that's not that much. Like, they're going to go down really, really fast. So, I'd like to bring more, but we do have to worry, like, Yetis actually do have a decent chunk of HP. So if we bring too many Yetis, we'll end up routing ourselves. Especially considering, right, we do have some other mages on the field. We're just going to sacrifice this guy. Perhaps should have just had him to retreat, probably so. So anyway, this obviously could get hit with Wind of Death, but, these guys are way better set up to deal with Wind of Death. Like, we will lose the Communion probably to the Wind of Death, but, that's fine. Losing one of the Throne Mages would hurt a bit more, and, like, even, he's a mage, but he's human, so certainly Wind of Death would be bad for him. So not without risk, and then of course as the army slams into it, there's a good chance that we just lose this for not that much damage, but at the same time I feel like we got to switch it up, and I don't want to walk the army straight into Wind of Death Trap. So that's what we're going to be trying. We're pulling the army into this province, so more or less everything that we've covered. And so if we do lose the battle here, we're in a decent spot to react to whatever Atlantis does. We'll again be in a bit of a difficult situation because they could jump on top of our fort, or they could head towards our capital. So if we move down here to try to block them, pretty sure this will one turn crack a more or less empty fort. So we again we'll be chasing their armies, similar to the situation I think we're going to be in the south, which is not great for a variety of reasons, including we're probably going to just drop off Wind of Death Traps for us. So we'll see, pretty concerned about all this. We're moving a few answers out to try to, catch these raiders. Probably next turn we'll move somebody out to, try to raid this province back. We're trying to get a scout onto Raga to see, how much got left behind. Doing a little bit of raiding, inside their territory with the tyrants. We're actually moving on top of a fort. This is kind of the first time we're doing this. I probably should have done it sooner. I mean, it's hard to say. One of the advantages of these armies, moving out of their territory, is that Atlantis now has a lot less inside, their heartland, whereas before, we could have run into some armies, but now there's a lot less stuff here. There's still a decent amount of Forgiving Fathers. Monoliths, I do not believe can patrol, although don't quote me on that. But anyway, we can certainly lock this fort down. There's not a whole lot in it. And even though we're never going to be able to take the fort with these units, they do generate a lot of unrest really quickly. So probably should have been doing this sooner to try to shut down Atlantis's recruitment as much as possible. If you get unrest over 100, you can't recruit until you patrol it down. Now Atlantis has plenty of troops, they'll be able to patrol it down, but you can get it a lot higher than 100 for unrest. Now, I do expect Atlantis isn't going to let us just sit on top of their fort for a long time, but, we may have a couple turns before they can realistically respond. Would love to, lock down the capital, prevent recruitment, right? Because that's where the Wind of Death fellows are coming from. I'll have to double check if the Monolith can patrol, because a little bit concerned. Monolith plus the Forgiving Fathers might be a bit too much for us to handle. But we can at least, mess up one of their forts. Atlantis doesn't actually, no, they have a good amount of underwater infrastructure. I was going to say they don't have that much infrastructure, but of course, probably more than half of it is underwater. Maybe it's a little less than half, I guess, technically. Palisade barely counts. But anyway, yeah, considering their underwater forts, they do have a good amount of infrastructure. But, if we can shut one down, that will help us. So I think that more or less covers, what we're doing, at least in terms of our moves, where there's no major recruitment. Basically all the money, this is all the money right here, I have to say. Dominions does a great job, I think, of making, the mechanics really match the themes for the various nations. And, I have to say, I feel like they've done a good job here, too, because playing this nation kind of feels like a descent into madness. On the one hand, the tyrants are so good, it feels like, it's a bad idea. You got to recruit as many of them as possible, especially, balanced against the fact that, the rest of the nation is kind of underwhelming. But then you start to get into a situation where it's at first, I just stopped recruiting troops, right? We haven't really recruited troops in a while, at least not in any, meaningful numbers. And, now I'm recruiting, I think, literally no mages anywhere else, right? None of our forts. Okay, here we go. We have one mage that's finishing off. I think that's the only mage. Do we have one here? Yeah, no mage here. So we have all this infrastructure, but nothing is being recruited out of it. It's all just being poured into the tyrants, who are just, marching around our territory, increasing unrest all over the place, eating up all of our money with, their income, or their upkeep. And yet it still feels like it's should I, not recruit a tyrant? And it's we probably should recruit another tyrant. So I don't know, it feels crazy not to recruit them, but it also feels crazy to recruit them. Like I said, I definitely think, my build is awful for a lot of reasons. But I think, first and foremost, taking a bless for the tyrants, you slap a shroud on them. Not really sure how you're going to solve, the protection problems that come with that, if you're up against, say, a bunch of hell-blessed giants. But at minimum, it's going to make your upkeep situation still not great. It's still going to be expensive, but at least a lot better. So anyway, that's what's going on in our land of madness. Otherwise, I think Utgard is really starting to turn on the blood hunting. And I have to say, I was thinking they were going to act sooner, but they may just be content to like try to turn their blood up to 11, while everybody else, ends up damaging themselves, fighting each other. Obviously, like the Marignon Mictlan conflict has not been without loss for either side. At the same time, I do wonder, right, if, their window is potentially closing, because it's kind of looking like this war is not going great for Mictlan. Obviously there was a pretty costly battle there for Marignon, so, it's not like they're going down without a fight. They're also in a 2v1, which is always a difficult situation. And they still have, like, some unlocked forts, but, like, yeah, we can see there's a palisade in Mictlan's cap circle that Ulm has taken. It's not looking good. There's not a whole lot of room for free Mictlan forts and or provinces. So I'd say, probably in another 5 to 10 turns, this is going to be over. And from there, maybe Marignon wants to try to eat Ulm next, right? I think Ulm is probably, of Marignon's neighbors, the weaker and smaller of the two, but not by a huge margin. Honestly, at that point, it'll probably come down more to, who has more thrones. And I've been pretty concerned about Utgard getting a throne victory, but we probably should take a look. They might go for Ulm, actually, now that I'm looking at it, because Ulm does have a couple of thrones on the border, and we've lost track of who has this throne, as well as this throne. So yeah, we need to get our scouts rolling, because Marignon could come away with it. On the other hand, like, there's not really anything we can do about that. So, it's kind of irrelevant to us. I'm planning on staying friendly with Marignon just from the simple fact that, like, they're our best ally by geography. So anyway, I think that covers, the happenings in the rest of the world, and also more or less covers turn 68.